Elena had learned somewhere around age 14 that certain doors in her family's house were decorative, not literally, but they were rooms, conversations, occasions, forms of recognition that existed in theory and collapsed in practice whenever she approached them. Her brother Marcus got a catered dinner when he graduated. Tablecloth, centerpiece, the good plates that lived in the cabinet above the refrigerator and came down maybe twice a year. Her cousin Petra got a weekend trip to the coast when she passed her nursing boards. Her father made a toast. Her mother cried in the good way. When Elena made senior analyst at 31, the youngest in her division, the only woman in the program's 9-year history to reach that level, her mother left a voicemail, distracted, warm in the vague way of someone multitasking, something about being proud, something about scheduling being complicated this time of year. Her father delivered his version 3 weeks later at Sunday dinner, between the salad course and the main. He hadn't looked up from his plate. "We're not wasting our time on your pathetic little promotion ceremony." He said it the way people say things they've practiced into casualness. Her brother kept eating. Her mother refilled her water glass. Elena said nothing because she had stopped arguing with furniture years ago, and she understood, with the particular clarity of someone who had been collecting data for a long time, that the sentence was not new. It was only the most recent and honest version of something she'd been hearing in softer form since childhood. She drove home. She fed her cat. She did not cry because she had made her peace with the specific grief of being consistently underestimated by the people who were supposed to know you best. It was a dull grief by then, familiar. It fit the way old shoes fit, badly, but without surprise. What her family did not know, what she had not corrected them about, she had described it accurately, technically, a recognition event, her division, a formal acknowledgement, all true. What she had not explained was the venue, the Pentagon, East Entrance, a credentialing ceremony tied to a classified federal infrastructure security program she had spent 2 years building from a white paper into something real. The Deputy Secretary of Defense would be in attendance. There would be photographers waiting near the stage long before the ceremony officially began. There would be polished marble floors reflecting the overhead lights, rows of carefully arranged chairs, and security officers standing at exact measured distances from the podium because every detail inside that building operated according to protocol. Nothing there happened casually. Every movement had structure. Every person had clearance. Every name on the invitation list had been reviewed 3 separate times before approval. Maya knew all of this. She had spent nearly 3 years inside that world, but she had never explained any of it to her parents. There had once been a time when she tried. A younger version of her would have printed the event schedule, highlighted important names, and rehearsed explanations during the drive home from work. She would have carefully described the significance of the project, hoping they would finally understand the scale of what she had accomplished. She would have watched their faces closely, searching for some sign of genuine interest. That version of Maya no longer existed, not because she hated them, not because she was angry, because eventually people grow tired of speaking into rooms where nobody truly listens. The change happened gradually over years. Conversations interrupted halfway through, achievements acknowledged with polite nods before attention shifted elsewhere, milestones treated like temporary inconveniences instead of meaningful moments. Her mother had always mastered the art of listening without hearing. Her father had perfected the habit of redirecting conversations toward safer subjects whenever Maya became too visible. Over time, she learned something important. Effort becomes exhausting when it is never met halfway. Eventually, she stopped trying to translate her world into language they would value. It wasn't bitterness. It was efficiency. She had learned to invest her energy in people who looked directly at her when she spoke, people who asked follow-up questions because they genuinely cared about the answers, people who celebrated her success without treating it like a surprising deviation from expectation. The ceremony itself lasted less than 40 minutes. The applause was professional and measured. Government events rarely allowed emotional excess. People shook hands. Photographs were taken. Names were announced alongside titles and departments. A speaker discussed infrastructure modernization and national resilience, while reporters scribbled notes near the back of the room. Maya stood beneath the limestone columns outside afterward, while photographers snapped a few final images. One picture captured her clearly. She stood with perfect posture beside a senior federal administrator, 2 uniformed security attachés positioned several feet behind them near the entrance stairs. The sunlight caught the edge of her dark coat, while her identification badge rested against the fabric like quiet proof of everything she had built. The image appeared in the Sunday paper, not on the front page, not sensational, just important enough to matter to people paying attention. Her name appeared beneath the photograph alongside her title and one short sentence describing her role in a federal infrastructure initiative. Maya never sent the article to her parents. Someone else did. She never discovered who. Maybe an old family friend, maybe a neighbor, maybe someone from church who still read newspapers at the kitchen table every Sunday morning and recognized her face immediately. By Tuesday morning, her phone rang while she was reviewing reports in her office. Her mother's name lit up across the screen. Maya stared at it for several seconds before answering. The voice that greeted her sounded unfamiliar, careful, measured, almost cautious. It carried the strange tone people use after discovering they may have misunderstood someone important. "We need to talk," her mother said. Maya leaned back slowly in her chair. "About what?" There was a pause. Then her mother cleared her throat softly. "Family meeting tomorrow evening." The phrase almost made Maya smile. Family meeting. Interesting. People who had spent years declining invitations to her life were suddenly issuing formal summons. She opened her calendar and entered the time without argument. Okay. After hanging up, she sat quietly in her office for a long moment. Outside the glass walls, employees moved through hallways carrying folders and coffee cups. Phones rang. Meetings continued. Normal life moved around her uninterrupted. Inside, she experienced something stranger than anger or satisfaction. Curiosity. There was something oddly fascinating about becoming visible to people who had spent years overlooking you. Not satisfying, not vindicating, just revealing. The next afternoon, she sat alone in the parking garage beneath her apartment building for exactly 11 minutes before starting the car. Not because she was nervous, because she needed to make one decision cleanly before walking back into that house. She could arrive as the daughter they remembered, quiet, careful, apologetic without realizing it, the version of herself who constantly adjusted her tone to make other people comfortable. Or she could arrive as the person she had actually become, a woman whose confidence no longer depended on family recognition, a woman who had built an entire life beyond their limited understanding of her. She considered both options carefully, then rejected them both, because neither felt completely accurate anymore. Instead, she chose something simpler. She decided to arrive honestly, and she decided not to shrink. Dr. Nathan Keller had supervised her division for nearly 4 years, former intelligence consultant, former defense advisor, the kind of man whose calm presence made loud people seem childish by comparison. He rarely interrupted anyone because he never needed to compete for attention. When Maya mentioned the family meeting casually during lunch earlier that week, he looked at her thoughtfully over the rim of his coffee cup. "I could come with you," he said. She blinked. "What?" He shrugged lightly. "I've met a lot of parents." The offer wasn't dramatic. No grand speech, no pity, just practical support. Maya thought about it overnight before accepting. Now he sat quietly in the passenger seat beside her as they drove through the familiar streets of her hometown. Neither of them spoke much during the drive. They didn't need to. When they arrived, her mother opened the front door almost immediately. The expression on her face shifted the moment she saw Dr. Keller standing beside Maya. Confusion first, then nervousness, then sudden hospitality. "Oh," her mother said quickly. "Please come in." Her father sat at the head of the dining room table, exactly where he always sat. Her younger brother leaned against the kitchen counter, scrolling through his phone with the detached expression of someone attending an obligation rather than a conversation. Coffee had already been prepared. The tablecloth was freshly ironed. Everything about the room looked overly arranged, like they were hosting someone important. For the first time in her life, Maya realized they finally understood that someone important was her. The conversation began awkwardly. Questions about the ceremony, questions about the building, questions about the security officers standing near the stage. Her father framed everything as concern mixed with curiosity. What exactly was that event for? Maya opened her mouth to answer, but Dr. Keller spoke first. Calmly, precisely. He explained the federal initiative by scope and function. He described the security requirements, the years of planning involved, the national implications of the infrastructure project. Then he spoke about Maya, not emotionally, not dramatically, factually. He outlined her role as lead architect on the project, explained the clearance level required for her position, detailed the number of departments involved, and the significance of her contribution. Every sentence landed with quiet authority, because truth presented calmly becomes difficult to dismiss. Her mother stared at the tablecloth while he spoke. Her father folded and unfolded his hands repeatedly. Her brother slowly lowered his phone. The room didn't explode into conflict. It collapsed inward quietly, like a structure realizing too late that its foundation had been built incorrectly. Maya recognized the exact moment the family story about her stopped working. For years, they had treated her achievements like hobbies, temporary accomplishments, interesting little side notes. Now, an outside voice was placing measurable weight behind everything they had minimized. And because the voice belonged to someone they instinctively respected, they could no longer pretend not to understand. Her father finally attempted to speak. We always knew you were capable of. Maya gently let the sentence die unfinished, not to punish him, because she no longer had the energy to help people complete truths they should have spoken years earlier. The silence afterward wasn't hostile, just honest. For once, nobody rushed to smooth it over. Eventually, the meeting ended. Her mother collected empty coffee cups with shaky hands. Her brother disappeared upstairs without saying goodbye. Her father stood near the doorway, looking older than usual somehow. Maya drove Dr. Keller back to his car in silence. Streetlights reflected across the windshield as they parked beside the federal garage downtown. He unbuckled his seatbelt slowly, then looked at her. "You okay?" The question settled differently than most questions did, because he actually wanted the answer. Maya thought carefully before responding. Yes, and she meant something very specific by it. Not fine, not happy, not healed, just no longer trapped inside other people's limited understanding of her worth. Dr. Keller nodded once, like he understood completely. Good. They said goodnight. Maya drove home alone, fed her cat, changed into sweatpants, read half a chapter of a novel she barely absorbed, because her thoughts kept drifting back toward the dining room table and the expressions on her parents' faces. At 10:47 p.m., her phone vibrated. A text from her mother. "I didn't know. I should have." Maya read the message twice, then placed the phone face down on the counter. The words didn't magically repair anything. Awareness arriving late still arrives late, but it mattered slightly that the sentence existed at all. The next morning she replied, short, honest, careful not to sound cruel, careful not to sound comforting either. For the first time in her life, she answered without adjusting herself emotionally to protect someone else from discomfort. She simply told the truth, once, clearly. Then she went to work. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't closure. It was something quieter and more realistic than either of those things. A beginning, a new set of terms between people who had spent years operating under false assumptions. Whether those terms would survive, Maya didn't know yet. Trust rebuilt slowly when neglect had existed for decades. Still, as she sat inside her office later that afternoon, watching sunlight spread across the city skyline beyond the windows, she realized something unexpected. For the first time in years, she wasn't afraid of finding out what happened next.